Avengers Endgame serves as the resolution to the story of the original 6 Avengers: Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, Captain America, Hawkeye, and Black Widow. Some of these characters have run their course and will likely never appear on screen again, while others will definitely stick around, albeit in roles of reduced significance. If you want to avoid spoilers for Endgame, then click off now because I'm going to talk about everything, or at least as much as I can remember. To start things off, I'd like to mention that I've now seen Endgame twice in theaters and am overall happy with how it ended Iron Man and Captain America's stories respectively. Endgame had a monumental challenge facing it: resolving the stories of some of the most iconic fictional characters of our time, probably why the film ended up as long as it is. Personally, I was never all that interested in Iron Man or Thor back in the Phase 1 days. The first MCU movie I went to watch in cinemas was Captain America, and for the past 8 years, he's been my guy. Captain America was the Avenger in which I was most invested, and seeing his character come full circle in Endgame was beautiful. Now, if emotional satisfaction and fan service were enough to make for good movies, then Endgame would be a 10 out of 10. However, movies are more than just gratification, and to praise a heavily flawed film would devalue all the movies that are able to balance emotional fulfillment with objective quality. Endgame follows directly on from Avengers Infinity War, and that is no easy act to follow. There were so many firsts and character payoffs in that movie that topping it is essentially impossible. While I would give Infinity War an 8 out of 10, for Endgame the best I can do is 7, and here's why. I went into Endgame with minimal expectations. Seriously, all that I really desired to be in the movie was a rematch between Hulk and Thanos. I didn't go into watching Endgame with great expectations, and I don't have negative criticism of it because my expectations weren't met. I have negative criticism of the film because once I took off my rose-tinted glasses and watched it a second time, I realized how flawed Endgame is and how much better it could have been. Let's start with Endgame's humor. Full disclosure, I was hoping that Endgame would be much more grim and less funny than other MCU movies, but it's just as humorous as any other MCU film, and that's to its detriment at times. Easily the biggest example of this detrimental funniness would be Fat Thor. I'm very unsure as to what the Russo bros were thinking or what they were going for with this decision. It's been 5 years since Thor got his revenge on Thanos, but half of all life is still gone and Thor has become depressed. On one hand, it's totally realistic in that when people get depressed, they let themselves go in a number of ways. On the other hand, the tone of Fat Thor's introduction scene in New Asgard isn't somber or serious, it's played for comedic relief. At one point, Thor gets seriously choked up at the mention of Thanos' name, but for the rest of the scene he's compared to melted ice cream and threatens Noob Master 69 on Fortnite. Not only is Fat Thor tonally inconsistent, but I think this entire character change is in poor taste. When we see Thor in Endgame, he isn't a mournful and stoic warrior, he's a Lebowski-esque loser. Thor has become the punchline for many characters' jokes, and I'm not the only one who thinks he's a laughingstock. Both times I saw Endgame in theaters, the audience's reaction to Thor's new identity was laughter, even when they shouldn't have been laughing. Remember that scene right at the end of the movie when Thor symbolically hands over the throne to Valkyrie? There's a shot that follows Thor's hand as he reaches out to shake Valkyrie's, in which his beer belly is visible, and everyone around me chuckled as if they had just been sorely reminded that he lost his god bod. I think I know what the directors and writers were going for, but I feel that they ended up unintentionally creating an entirely new beast. For the vocal minority out there who felt that Endgame promoted fat shaming, just take a step out of your buzzword-toting virtue-signaling echo chamber for a moment and realize that catering to your hypocritical standards of morality is the lowest thing on any sane person's list of priorities. If you think that Fat Thor was in poor taste and could have been executed better, then I totally agree with you. But if you saw characters in Endgame making jokes at Thor's expense and your first response is to condemn the movie for fat shaming, then not only do you not understand the nature of depression and how it could affect a character such as Thor, but you are clearly more concerned with hopping on a buzzword bandwagon and reciting recycled platitudes than you are with providing actual criticism. Fat Thor was overall a mark against Endgame, which I think is terrible because a depressed Thor could have been such an interesting take for the movie to present to us. While still on the subject of humor, let's talk about Professor Hulk. Even though my only wish was for Hulk and Thanos to have a rematch at the end of Endgame, I was overall whelmed by this character quote-unquote development. I just put my expectations aside and let the movie take me for a ride, so when Bruce showed up Hulk-sized with glasses and stubble, I didn't put any thought to it. And even though I feel that Bruce hulking out in the final battle just so that he could fight Thanos again would have been satisfying to watch and a good character arc, I'm mostly indifferent to Professor Hulk. I don't really care for this change one way or the other, but I do think it's sad that this change happened off-screen. It would have been nice to see the Avengers' candid reactions to the change, and it would have felt more organic. When we are introduced to Professor Hulk, it's to Scott's shock and awe, and in that we identify with him, seeing that the Hulk and Bruce have melded for the first time, just as Scott does. Then some kids show up asking for a photo, there's a seriously drawn out joke about Ant-Man's lack of popularity, and finally Hulk dabs as if there wasn't enough tying this movie to its real world release date already. I didn't want there to be so much humor in Endgame, but seeing how miserably some of it missed its mark just adds insult to injury. Beyond humor, there are also a lot of interesting character progressions and moments in Endgame, some better than others. At the start of the movie, we see Hawkeye lose his family to the Snapshot, and over the course of the 5-year time jump, he goes on a worldwide killing spree as Ronin, an identity multiple characters have adopted in the comics, usually while on the run. That could have been a movie all on its own. We would have gotten to see Clint turn from depressed and grieving family man into reckless psychopath over the course of 5 years, a missed opportunity to say the least. As previously mentioned, Hulk and Banner merged to form Professor Hulk, which also could have been a movie in itself. Bruce said the process took him 8 months in a lab, so that could have been an interesting psychological thriller that, as far as we know, happened off-screen. Captain Mediocre is back and lets us know that there are plenty of other planets in the universe that do not have a super team like the Avengers. So, from this, we can infer that Captain Mary Sue has spent the last who knows how long roaming the universe to help whoever needs her. That could have been a movie. Weird. It's almost as if a 5-year time jump leaves a lot of room for questioning what powerful and driven characters were doing during it. Of course, there are more minor character moments that don't leave most of the story up to our imagination. Tony scolding Steve and calling him a liar was fantastic. Thor meeting his mother was sweet, even if slightly drawn out. The Captain America mirror match was pretty neat. Tilda Swinton was definitely my favorite returning character from the earlier MCU. The different take on the elevator scene from Winter Soldier was absolutely delightful. Seeing Star-Lord singing like an idiot again on Morag was great. And Captain America wielding Mjolnir like a pro was probably my favorite part of the movie. Come to think of it, Captain America gets a lot of moments in this movie, which I think is fitting considering how much less screen time he had in Infinity War, which I also think is fitting considering how much more screen time he had in Civil War. The final battle between the Avengers and Thanos' army is full of great character moments and payoffs. My favorite of which was when Wanda went Old Testament on Thanos. I got shivers, it was terrific. Peter reuniting with Tony was sweet but felt misplaced amid all the action. Quill seeing old Gamora was alright. The same with Scott seeing Hope again. Captain Meh showing up last minute to save the day was just as shoehorned in as her entire role in the MCU. The all-female shot was cool. It's not as tacked on as Captain Marvel is, but it's missing one crucial character, Black Widow. Her sacrifice earlier in the movie was extremely well executed and I wouldn't have done it any other way. But Black Widow was the first female Avenger. She was the second Avenger ever introduced in the MCU. There is no female character who has as much reason to be at the center of that shot as Black Widow does. Her absence from this shot feels like a betrayal of the character and her legacy. Overall, this all-female team-up feels more like something being checked off a list than a genuine movie moment.
You know what they say, one for you, one for them.
Now then, let's talk about Thanos, because he dies 5 seconds into the movie and the Thanos in the climactic battle is not the same one from Infinity War. Is this good or bad? I'll go with my opinion first. I don't mind it. When I saw Thanos get decapitated right at the beginning of the movie, I was surprised to say the least. Color my expectations subverted. I had reason to believe that time travel would play a part in the movie, so I figured that that would bring in the conflict for the final fight. About halfway through the movie, we see 2014 Thanos get notified of future Nebula's presence, and this is essentially where the dramatic tension starts. 2014 Thanos, who is actually the only Thanos at this point, combs through future Nebula's memory and relives his death and sees that Nebula has joined the Avengers. Right before the Trinity fight Thanos during the climax, he has this great line that goes something like this: "I now see that as long as there are those who remember what was, there will always be those who refuse to accept what can be." He then goes on to threaten to shred the universe down to its last atom so that he can make a new one. We never see Thanos view the events of Infinity War through Nebula's memory, but it is heavily implied that he did just that. After seeing a large portion of his future, including his own death, Thanos decides that the Avengers, along with the rest of the universe, must die for a grateful new one to be created. Thanos' fair and dispassionate approach to balance is no more. He is now fully committed to the destruction of the entire universe. Thanos' seeing his own future informed and reinforced his bloodlust, and I, for one, seriously enjoyed this development. I love the idea that Thanos saw what his philosophy of balance led to and changed it accordingly, all while retaining his god complex. While I personally appreciate the direction they took with Thanos at the end of Endgame, there is a tragic other side to this coin. Infinity War built up Thanos in such a genuine and meaningful way that his absence from Endgame is devastating. And I don't mean Thanos' absence, I mean Infinity War Thanos' absence. Thanos is there for the climactic battle, but that isn't the Thanos who had all the development in Infinity War. Since I saw Infinity War, I have believed that it was Thanos' movie. He has the most screen time of any character, and after the credits, where The Avengers will return would usually appear, it instead read Thanos will return. You could almost say Infinity War was dedicated to Thanos. This is why it's so sad that the Thanos who we spent all the time connecting to and learning about dies 15 minutes in and is replaced by a far less familiar character. Almost as if past Thanos is a caricature of the future one. This is a bold statement, but I believe that Thanos, the one from Infinity War, belongs in the hall of the all-time greatest fictional villains. I think Thanos belongs up there alongside Darth Vader, Scar, and Heath Ledger's Joker. I understand that that is a very bold statement that deserves further elaboration, so maybe I'll make a video about it all on its own. While I genuinely like the way Endgame portrayed past Thanos, having learned of his victory and subsequent death, I cannot help but yearn for Infinity War Thanos and his Shakespearean expository dialogue to return. Endgame's denouement is filled to the brim with payoffs and setups. Tony's funeral was touching and felt like the perfect send-off to the man who started the MCU. Thor handed the throne of Asgard over to Valkyrie, who we're told is more of a leader than he is, and Thor proceeds to join the Guardians. There is no limit to how much fun could be had with Thor as a Guardian of the Galaxy. An interesting question that past Gamora coming to the future raises is, will she replace her future/deceased self on the team? My friends and I initially thought that Tony's snap would have dusted Gamora because he's never met Gamora in person and she isn't seen after the snap. But right before Thor comes on board the Benatar, Quill can be seen looking at a screen with Gamora's picture on it and the word searching. So finding and recruiting Gamora might be the plot of Guardians 3. Finally, we come to Cap's send-off. As I said earlier, I am happy with how my favorite character's story has come to a close. Steve getting his dance with Peggy was the most emotionally satisfying part of the whole movie for me. Although I do have mixed feelings about this scene. It seems kind of inconsiderate that Captain America would use time travel to have a life back in the 20th century without telling any of his friends or teammates. And on that note, I noticed on my second watch that before Cap leaves to return the stones to their respective times, Bucky hugs him and says that he'll miss him. If Bucky knows that time travel will only take a few seconds for onlookers, then it makes no sense that he would tell Cap that he would miss him. So my theory is that Steve informed Bucky that he would return to his old life, and Bucky meant that he would miss him as a teammate. If this is the case, then why didn't Steve take Bucky back with him? They're from the same time period, and Bucky has just as much of a life there as Steve does. We have to assume that Bucky chose to stay in the present, or, alternatively, Steve didn't tell Bucky a damn thing and planned on living a life in the past with no consideration for what Bucky wanted. Either way, this is easily the most selfish thing Cap has ever done. He stole a lifetime away from his teammates and friends without telling them. Does he think that the world won't need him anymore? If the MCU has proven anything, it's that the threats the characters face only increase in severity over time. Now you might say that Cap earned it. He served as an Avenger and just returned to his rightful place in history. Which is a fair point, but is also a very charitable read considering he didn't tell most of his friends and left his best friend, who is also from the past, in the present with people who have no love for him besides having worked with and fought alongside him. Steve then hands a new shield over to Sam, declaring that it's his and that he is the new Captain America. Bucky hanging back during the scene supports the idea that he knew what Steve was going to do the whole time. The only problem I have with this passing of the torch is that of all the friends and teammates Steve left behind, there is only one with no superhero identity who could really have used the shield to right his past wrongs. Bucky. What do the writers have against Bucky in this scene? He gets no dialogue with Old Man Steve and gets his redemption arc taken out from under him. If you would argue that Falcon becoming the new Captain America fits because it happened in the comics, then, by that logic, Bucky would be a more appropriate recipient of the title because he was the second person to take on the Captain America mantle in the comics. Bucky has spent decades being a brainwashed assassin for Hydra. The Winter Soldier joining the Avengers, while feasible, is nowhere near as fitting of a redemption as the Winter Soldier being passed the mantle of Captain America. At the end of the day, I still have a decent amount of faith in the MCU, so I'm fine with whatever they do with their characters, as long as they keep solid storytelling as their focus and don't continue to inject politics into their work. What am I talking about? That's a pipe dream and a half. I really am interested in the new take on time travel that Endgame presents, but I think that deserves a video all to itself just because of how complicated it seems. As always, I love discussion and debate, so if you have any criticism of my review of Avengers Endgame, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you next time.